to winning isn't easy. Let's talk more about functional capacity evaluations. I'm going to give you an overview of the functional capacity evaluations and the residual functional capacities, and we're going to dig down a little deeper. Let's say your doctor says they don't have any special expertise to estimate your capacity to perform work-related activities, and they won't fill out a form in support of your claim. What should I do? And this situation also generally will arise in the context of an ERISA disability claim. Now, I will tell you that the Social Security Administration does not require the treating physician to have any special expertise or training to render an opinion about functional restrictions and limitations, and what you can do, still do, despite your physical impairments. Determining what you can do really is based on an exercise of their professional judgment to figure out whether your symptoms are in fact attributable to your diagnosis, whether your symptoms are consistent with the nature of the medical signs and findings, whether your claim's symptoms related limitations are reasonably consistent with the medical signs and findings on examination and diagnostic studies. And in my view, this is what doctors do every day. Social Security is more interested, I think, in your doctor's longitudinal perspective based on repeated examinations and treatment than any special expertise they might have in rendering opinion about your functional restrictions and limitations. So you should explain to your doctor in the context of a Social Security case that they don't need any special expertise in estimating your capacity for performing work-related activities, and ask them once again if they're willing to fill out a form. Now, your physician, I think, should also get your opinion about your ability to do work-related activities and then exercise their professional judgment. You have to be careful about that because the doctor will potentially rely on your subjective complaints. And if there isn't any consistency, the judge will seize on that in the context of your Social Security case. As I've said before, if they don't want to fill out the form, change your physician. You want to find a doctor who's a great treating physician, but one who will support your claim by filling out a residual functional capacity form. Now, let's talk about this in the context of an ERISA disability claim. The disability carrier does expect that forms filled out by a physician come from a specialty physician who has expertise in your disabling condition and has had a period of time to treat you. That isn't to say that if we have to, we won't get forms filled out by a treating physician like a GP. But if I've got a fibromyalgia case, I want a rheumatologist to fill it out. If I have a cardiological case, I want the cardiologist to fill it out. If I have a Ehlers-Danlos claim, I want a Ehlers-Danlos specialist, or in the case of an MS case, I want the specialist to be filling out the form. And I'm going to be giving them a residual disability functional capacity form that we use in Social Security that asks the right questions as a supplement to the APS. So there is a significant difference here, and that can impact our strategy when we're handling both the Social Security disability and ERISA disability claim. And remember, this information about your Social Security claim is going to be shared to the LTD carrier. They have a right to it. And the Social Security Administration wants to see what's in your LTD file, particularly the medical records or FCEs, that sort of thing. So, we've got to be sure that we're consistent because potentially it's going to be used in both of your cases. Got it? Okay. Now, let's say your doctor says, I don't know the definition of disability for Social Security purposes, and I'm not going to complete a residual functional capacity form. What should you do? Well, your doctor doesn't need to know the definition of disability under the Social Security rules. And in fact, Social Security doesn't want your doctor to say you're disabled. Social Security says, look, it's our job to determine whether or not you meet our 5-step sequential evaluation. Do you have a medically determinable impairment? Is it going to result in your death or last or expected to last a continuous period of 12 months? Do you have an impairment that meets or equals a listing? Does it prevent you from performing the lightest job you held in the 15 years before you became disabled? Does it prevent you from doing other work in the national economy in view of your age, education, skills, and restrictions and limitations? That's what they want to know. If your doctor wrote a letter that says, hey, I'm disabled, Social Security is going to throw it in the garbage. And what they want to know is what can you do or not do? And the best way to get at that, in my view, is the residual functional capacity forms. If you're under 50, the Social Security Administration is really going to determine your ability to do full-time sedentary work. And the younger you are, the harder it gets. And you really have to be significantly disabled to establish that you can't do full-time sedentary work, which is sitting for 6 hours out of an 8-hour workday, standing or walking intermittently for 2 hours per day, and occasionally lifting 10 pounds. Now, I will tell you, if you're over 50, the game generally depends on where you're at in this age range. Can be light work or sedentary work or less than sedentary. And so the game is a little different depending on your age over 50. The game, though, in the context of an ERISA disability claim, is a bit different. I think your doctor does need to know the definition of disability. Is it an inability to do the material and substantial duties of your occupation? What are those material and substantial duties? So you got to tell the doctor, this is what I have to do in my occupational duties, X, Y, and Z, because you specifically want your doctor to address the restrictions and limitations in the context of your occupational duties. Similarly, when you're at the any occupation stage, the game there is sedentary or less, a bit like Social Security, but I think a little more exacting, because we want to prove that you have difficulty sitting, maintaining pace and concentration. You have to alternate sitting and standing, that you have potentially difficulty with bilateral manual dexterity, or you have difficulty maintaining pace or concentration. I think the proof is a bit more complex in the context of an ERISA disability claim than it is in the context of a Social Security case when it comes to the issue of why you can't perform other work. Now, what should you do if your doctor says, I'm not playing ball here? Again, I think that they should be exercising their professional judgment. And that judgment is judgment that I think, quite frankly, is more common sense than necessarily medical sense. Unless you do an occupation or a job that the doctor isn't particularly familiar with, I do think that in both instances, you should be educating the doctor about what it is you do. But more importantly, at the end of the day, we really want to understand functionally, both from a physical standpoint and from a psychological standpoint, your functional restrictions. Now, you may have a case involving fibromyalgia. You might have ME/CFS. You might have PD. You might have Parkinson's. You might have Ehlers-Danlos. You might have any type of disease that either has a cognitive component or has a fatigue component. Cognitive issues are real, and I think that they potentially should be measured by having appropriate neuropsychological testing. And the fatigue issues are real. It might be that you're in so much pain that you can't sleep. You might have brain fog that interferes with your ability to process information, and then you become mentally fatigued. That sort of thing needs to be documented. Many times I will see in medical records that a doctor performs a mini mental status examination, which is what day is it? Like what's the weather? Who's the president? Count back, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, count the other way. A pretty simple mental status examination that is not an accurate measure of a person's cognitive abilities or the impact of fatigue. And in those instances, I think that you need to have appropriate testing. Now, if your doctor says, I don't recommend the testing, I'm not going to perform the testing, I'm not going to fill out forms, time to change doctors. And many times in the context of a case, that is why the claim has gotten denied. Either there is no support from the physician or appropriate testing hasn't been done, and there's not an adequate explanation as to why the person has these physical problems, cognitive problems, or psychological problems, and the impact that they have on a person's ability to do their past work, their own occupation, or other work in the national economy, or other occupations. Again, since I handle both Social Security and ERISA disability cases, I'm looking at these issues across both of these cases and figuring out, okay, well, here's the strength or weakness of the Social Security case. this is what's missing, this is what I need to prove. And over here in the ERISA case, the peer-reviewed doctor cherry-picked the records here, and I need to do this or that. So I'm coming up with one coordinated strategy to try to address both the deficiencies in the context of the Social Security case and the ERISA case. And you can see why there's this interaction and why it's important that you have a strong team comprised of an expert in ERISA work, Social Security work, and one that can work well with you and your doctor. That's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. Please like our page, leave a review, share it with your family or friends, and please subscribe to our podcast. I hope that you'll tune in next week for another insightful episode of Winning Isn't Easy. Thanks.